My name is DeAna, and I am a recovered compulsive eater, and I will be today's speaker. Yeah, it's great to say that I'm recovered. I remember trying so many things in the past and always kind of having a lurking fear in the back of when is this going to fail to? When's the shoe going to drop? But I don't feel that way in this program, as I'm sure a lot of other recovered people can identify with, because it certainly works if you work it. But yeah, I'm going to share, what my life was like, what happened, and life now. So pretty early on, food started to take a really central role in my life. I just remember having big feelings and not knowing what to do with it. And there were big things going on when I was younger, and it seemed like it hit all at once. There's divorce, moving away from family, changing schools, having to make friends, conflict in the home, yelling, fighting. I'm living with one parent, living with another. My siblings not always there. So there was just a lot going on, and I felt like it was unfair. And I remember being in social situations I didn't feel comfortable in because, just felt out of place. I was more shy and introverted. But I'll tell you what, food felt like an anchor. It felt like something that just kind of quieted everything down. And, it worked. It worked for a while. I didn't think there was a problem. I knew I was a little odd with food, the fact that I ate food that wasn't mine and then I felt bad about it after. Or I remember my mom saying, "What's wrong with you?" when I got upset and I grabbed food and ran upstairs. But I didn't think it was a big deal. It worked. It filled in all the blanks for me, the entertainment, the boredom, the needing to take the edge off. And the only reason I started to be more concerned about my eating was I started to put on weight at an early age. So I was actually overweight as a kid. And, adults would comment about it. My peers would comment about it. So it just added to the layer of, I didn't really like life when I was younger. Felt like a lot of things were unfair. And, food, that's mine. I'm going to, I use it. And so my body and weight became the focus. Like how can I control this? And I call it like the carrot that gets dangled in front of you that you're like, that's motivating you. The carrot that would dangle in front of me is when you get to looking, like a normal weight or slender or whatever, then life is going to be as it should be. You're going to have more friends. People aren't going to tease you. And, a lot of ego involved, you're going to get all this kind of stuff. So I went on my first diet at age 12, and I just remember really hanging all my hopes. I mean, everything rode on the fact of whether or not I was, I could lose weight. I mean, it was just really incredible. And I did. I went on my first diet at age 12. And my history includes where I binge ate and I would compulsively exercise. And I would say that more of my life, I was a couch potato. I wasn't very physically active. But when I get into exercise, I'm very driven, and I can just go at it full force to extremes. But I remember at age 12, like a teacher tapping me on the shoulder, and she's like, "Hey, be careful." And, I had lost some weight, but I didn't think there was anything drastic about what I was doing, but my appearance did look different. And so, lots of great things happened as a result. I got praise from adults and kids, and, I had more friends, and my mom took me out to buy cute clothes. So I'm thinking, this is all good. What I'm doing is good. But, it was kind of like trying to hold sand in your hand for a long time. I'm like, I'm trying to keep this up. Like, I don't want to go back into my eating, crazily. And, but, I did. I started eating more and more and more. And then, the clothes didn't fit anymore. And I just remember I kept looking at this particular skirt in my closet saying, I got to be able to fit into that. So, my weight would go up and down and up and down and up and down throughout my life. Sometimes 20, 40 pounds, sometimes up to 100 pounds. When I got to college, my character defects of procrastination and perfectionism really got the better of me, because I would put off projects and assignments that felt uncomfortable, but, I couldn't just eke by with a passing grade. I had to get a really good grade. And so what was I doing as I put those projects off? I was eating. I was eating constantly. And I became morbidly obese. And oddly enough, I work in healthcare. I was going to college for healthcare, and I wanted to do better, and I knew better. But I knew better, but I couldn't do better. Let's put it that way. Learned about nutrition and all that good stuff, exercise, and the importance of good health. That just wasn't enough to keep me in check. I felt like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, truly. And so, I remember asking a doctor if I could speak to someone. So that I started therapy for the eating problem. But, I've gone to a lot of therapy throughout my life, whether it be like maybe periodic episodes of depression or, anxiety or, just the weight. I've tried, hypnosis and the energy healing. And, I was just really convinced. I'm like, if I can't get to this problem at the conscious level through therapy, maybe it's in my subconscious. So hypnosis. And then I remember thinking neuro-linguistic programming was going to do it. I just had all these ideas. Energy healing. I learned how to do that on people. People were doing it to me. Healing, affirmations, intuitive eating. So I was determined to try and get this taken care of. But the more I tried, the worse I got. And so, I really hurt myself in the process. I mentioned compulsive exercising. So you might have heard it termed exercise bulimia. And I really do, now that I look at it, see that that's what it was. I would do crazy things like go to a bakery and buy a whole box of pastry. We're talking a lot of stuff. I would eat it in my car. And then I would go to Zumba and do Zumba exercise. And if you're not familiar with that, you're jumping around. It's moderate to vigorous. And did I feel sick as I did it? Absolutely, I felt sick. But that's just where my mind took me, and that's really what it means to be a chronic compulsive eater, is that your mind drives you to do things that, there's an aspect of you that's like, this is insane, but you can't not do it. You're driven to do it. But yeah, I hurt myself through the exercise. I gave myself an abdominal hernia, meaning I pushed myself so hard that, my abdominal wall, the muscle there, it tore. I didn't know it at the time that I did it. I found out afterwards. I went from like lying to sitting at a family member's house, and I could feel this thing push through in my abdomen. And I just remember reflexively thinking, I need to push that back in, and just thinking, oh crap, what have I done? And it's because just like with the compulsive eating, when you take that first compulsive bite and you're off to the races, you don't know how many you're going to eat. You're baffled at the end of it. I would do that with exercise. Like by the end of it, maybe I would spend 2.5 hours at the gym, and maybe I hit the weights really hard and then did cardio and then this and that and the other, and or exercising twice a day. So it's just, the mind would take me there. And I've, had health consequences as a result of my compulsive eating and the weight loss and gain. I had gallstones at age 20. I remember my peers in healthcare saying, yeah, usually that happens to women when they're in their 40s. Not all women, but usually. So I'm thinking, well, yeah, I do some crazy stuff. And right after I had gallbladder surgery, I knew I needed to stick to a certain diet. But no, I was going to have my way, and I ate something that I shouldn't have. That my body really couldn't process at the time, and I had pain. So again, I can know better, but I can't do better. So actually, believe it or not, it was a therapist who told me about 12 steps for my problem. So she said, you're awfully obsessed about, because I was consumed about my weight and how everything revolved around that. Can I see people? Should I go visit them? What are they going to think of me? Do I have an outfit to wear? The eating, I remember my sister pointing out how selfish I was, that I just, trying to keep up the exercise and everything, missing out on family things. And I remember I kind of lashed back like, oh, I'm not hurting anybody else. But, in hindsight, obviously we learned that, I'm very selfish. We're hurting lots of people. Yeah, so I did. I came to 12 Step for compulsive eating, and this is originally like 14 years ago, and I remember feeling such relief. Like, and these were local face-to-face meetings. And I remember thinking, oh man, I found my tribe. These people are talking about food and using it the way I do. And it really was like, I like to use the analogy of, National Geographic, how you watch and you see how these animals, interact and they engage in what they do in their lives. Well, that's how I looked at my peers and other people that were of normal weight or seemed to be able to manage their eating. I'm just like, what do you have that I don't have? Because I'm missing it. But yeah, so I come to 12 Step for compulsive eating, and I'm just relieved. And so I tried some approaches that were recommended to me. And by the way, I'm grateful I tried those approaches. And I would just say that really every experience is valuable. I don't think it's helpful or useful to say, oh, well, I wish that hadn't happened, like whatever it is in our compulsive eating journey, because truly, maybe it's going to help in the future when we talk to somebody else and share our story. Or like when I think about the things I tried, even when I got to 12 Step, I discovered that some of those approaches just didn't work for me, such as, things like journaling. I mean, I literally remember, this is a different 12 Step program, by the way, for eating, but I remember literally carving into a notebook because I was so upset with another person. But hey, I'm journaling. And really, I remember thinking, this isn't doing anything to get me out of this crazy thinking of mine. I've just ruined a whole pad of paper. I tried managing the food, trying to avoid the food I thought was a problem. And that, I have to tell you, I very vividly remember the moment when I had that light bulb go off, to discover that it wasn't about the food. And so what ended up happening is I started to use approaches that people mentioned, like I said, managing the food, using food plans, and working the steps with the sponsor. But the sponsor I had, had me work the steps slowly at my own pace. So what that means is I never got through the steps. And I couldn't stick to this plan of eating for good and all. And I remember I kept thinking, what in the heck is wrong with me? Am I self-punishing here? Am I just that weak-willed? And it wasn't until, I just love how higher power works. It wasn't until I went to like a convention, or this 12-step fellowship convention, that I heard someone speak, and I kind of tracked her down on Facebook because she was on, like, at the time they had discs where you could listen to someone speak. And I wanted to listen over and over and over again. And anyways, I got in touch with her. I said, man, I really want what you have. And she asked me what I was doing. And I had been in that other 12-step program, not getting recovered for about 3 years. So I was very frustrated. And I was just dieting. I was just doing my own thing, going to meetings, because I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It's not like I told my sponsor I'm not going to do the work. Things just kind of fell away, and I didn't understand why I didn't get well. And she, suggested that I check out some phone meetings that used a big book, and I did already have a big book. And, that I'm going to need to work the steps to get recovered, which I said, I'm all for that. I just, need someone to guide me. So I started to listen to some phone meetings, and I talked to someone, and I really was attracted to what she had to say. She said that she just had to work the steps. And that was attractive to me because I'd never heard that before. And what I was doing wasn't working. I was very frustrated. And she talked about, well, let's see. I still was kind of focused on the food. I was thinking I needed to manage it because I'm like, well, that's all I've ever heard and that's all I've ever done. I'm not quite understanding how, if I don't do that, it's not going to work. And she asked me just some questions. She's like, well, have you ever cut out your problem foods and compulsively ate other foods? And truthfully, I blanked out. I couldn't remember. It was only later that I could remember that. But she asked me some questions. She's like, well, why don't you get off the phone and ask yourself this question? If planet Earth was wiped of all foods except for 3 boring vegetables, we're going to call it, you pick them, celery, lettuce, and whatnot. Would you still compulsively eat those foods? She's like, but don't let the answer come real quick from your head. Let it come from your heart. Just really sit with that question. And I have to tell you, I really, really, really appreciated that she did this because it's what I needed. I wasn't at the place where I could see clearly what was going on, even though I was compulsively eating other foods besides what I thought were problem foods, but I couldn't see it. So through this line of questioning, I got off the phone and I really sat with the question. And what bubbled up for me was, well, yeah, you would still compulsively eat those foods because that's what you do. Meaning that's a behavior I do. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And and it's like in my mind's eye, I was being shown, DeAna, this would be you if all there was celery, and it's showing me just kind of gnawing on celery. And I'm just like laughing because I've never had to resort to that because I've always been able to get my hands on something I preferred. But if that's all it's going to be there, that's what I'm going to do. And I was being shown that it's not so much about the flavor and the taste, even though, yes, those are nice when you have it, but it's the behavior. So again, that felt like a light bulb moment because I got clear on what my problem was and more on what the solution. So I'm just sharing that because sometimes you might come across somebody that's just not sure. They have some skepticism, but they want to get well. That was just very helpful line of questioning. She didn't tell me anything. She didn't try to convince me. She's like, well, why don't you ask yourself this question? And that was very, very helpful to me. So I called her back and I said, boy, sign me up. I want this. In fact, when I had asked this question to myself, I got the image of like a dog chasing its tail, going round and round and round and round. Like this isn't doing anything for me. And then I learned later through her that, that's really it just makes me worse. So she mentioned working the steps quickly. And I thought, I've never heard that. That's very interesting. And she told me why. Well, because you only have a week to a month before your mind is going to talk you out of this. And she directed me to the big book. And I thought, that makes so much sense now. So I did. I got through, I worked with her. I got through the steps quickly. Then I started to sponsor. And yeah, I felt the relief. I felt the obsession lift. And I was just so incredibly grateful for that. It felt like a miracle, truly. Now, my history includes I've actually left the program twice after getting recovered. And so I was with that sponsor for a year or so, and then I just kept getting this nudge, this whisper to leave program. And I remember fighting with that, thinking, no, I'm not supposed to leave. This is lifelong, But I discussed it with my sponsor because it just kept coming up, and she's like, well, then you need to leave. And again, no experience is wasted. I needed to have some experiences, apparently. And then I came back, I got a different sponsor, and I got into a different 12-step program. It's still for compulsive eating, but a different group. And, got recovered and worked the steps. And what's interesting is just like they say, our illness is progressive. When we get recovered and we work a program, we're going to have to grow and change and, do new things in recovery. So I remember thinking when I came back that I was kind of ticked off that I wasn't feeling as much peace as I did before when I got recovered. And I'm like, I'm still having some food thoughts and this, that, and the other. And, and I was kind of upset about it. And what I love about this fellowship is that not only through sponsorship of my higher power do I learn, but I also learn from my fellows. So I remember being on a meeting and someone saying, you can't put conditions on God. You can't put conditions and expectations on what your recovery looks like. And that really hit me. And I thought, is that what I'm doing? And it's like, well, yeah, that's what you're doing. And it really helped me to hear or even see people post that are recovered to cure that, just they kind of shared a little bit about, maybe the eating they didn't feel was, maybe they didn't feel like it was entirely peaceful, but just know that you're on the right track. Really, all you have to do is you just have to keep working the program. Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob is one of the co-founders of AA. I say that in case there's anybody new on the line. He's one of the co-founders of AA, and our 12-step program is, patterned after that, and we use the Big Book of AA. And Dr. Bob, he still wanted to drink for a couple years after he got recovered. But it was either drink, go back to drinking, or keep working the steps. So that's just what I needed to do. And I just bring that up because, that was a big learning piece for me. I expected to feel the same level of peace I used to, but I also wasn't changing. I wasn't growing. And so what I hope to share is a little bit about, kind of getting recovered, but what I kind of learned as I've gone along, and that's, I can't just do the bare minimum. I can't just check off the boxes. I can't say, oh, well, yep, called a couple of newcomers or this, that, or the other. I've got to really just moment to moment ask God what's next. Maybe he's got something different in store for me than what I thought. And, I need to be willing to do that. And I've got to be willing to I think Kat said something on a meeting one time that was really stuck with me and is very helpful. It's kind of in the back of my mind. And it was, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but it was, I can't get comfortable. I can't get too comfortable. I'm going to have to, be inconvenienced, do some things that don't feel great, because then, you're growing. And, if you think about it, they use that term growing pains. Does that always feel good? No, they call it growing pains for a reason. So, it's going to be new. It might be scary, or it might be something we'd rather not do, but it's very important that we do that. So, I remember my higher power telling me, oh, you need to learn this new skill or learn how to moderate this meeting. And there were some skills that I needed to learn in order to do that. And there were bumps along the road, and funny bumps too, by the way, which is, odd ones, if you will. And at the end of it, and yeah, it was frustrating a little bit, but at the end of it, it was like God's like, everything isn't smooth sailing, DeAna. Just all you got to do is just work the program. It's going to be fine because, I like smooth sailing. That's my selfishness. I want things that are smooth. But yeah, and then when I come out of that, when I do the things my higher power asks me to do, I'm always better for it. Always. There's things that I've learned through doing various forms of service, or having different positions where it's helped me in my actual job, my career. It's given me confidence in doing other things. So, this program really does work wonders in all areas of your life. So, what do I do to stay recovered? What does life look like now? Well, I spend some time with God in the morning, and I ask him, what's his plans for me. I still have this crazy brain that likes to list off, 15 things I want to get done. And I just kind of laugh at that, and I acknowledge it, and kind of treat it like a passing cloud when I've got this quiet time with God, like, oh yeah, there's my thoughts. Okay. All right, God, what are your plans for me today? That's really what I need to get done. And yeah, so, I ask him how I can help the man or woman who's still sick, who's still suffering chronic compulsive eater. And, that's a priority. What I used to do that didn't work out so well is I used to try to fit the program work into my life. These are my plans. I got to get these things done or whatever. And what I discovered is that just doesn't work. I have to put working this program first, because if I don't, everything else suffers. I'm not a good employee. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good friend. I'm getting into self. So in step 3, I agreed that I was going to, turn everything over to this higher power. And in step 11 in the morning, I'm doing that. I'm asking what would you have me do for the day? And step 11 is important, the morning part of it, the prayer meditation, because it really gets me centered and connected with God. And it's kind of like I'm just saying, hey, you know what? I surrender. I don't have this thing. Please show me what you'd have me do, for the rest of the day. And then step 11 is, since I'm talking about step 11, throughout the day, I'm asking God, what would you have me do next? I mentioned earlier these defects of character, of procrastination and perfectionism, particularly the procrastination. I don't get away with that anymore. So I just ask God, what's the next right thing to do? Because I get overwhelmed. I used to get overwhelmed. Like if I had 10 things coming at me, I just kind of pause, realize that God's got it. I just got to do the next right thing. That's it. So that's a real blessing. And and then step 11, there's a nightly practice where we take some time with God and kind of look over our day, see how we showed up. And I send that to my sponsor. And then, so to stay recovered, I work steps 10, 11, and 12 every day because I'm recovered, but I'm not cured. So if I get sloppy and I get lazy in my program, I'm going to be thinking about food that I'm just like, why am I having those food thoughts, or wanting to eat when I'm not hungry? It's going to get weird, or I'm going to get really selfish with someone. So this is what I need to do to stay well. So I'm going to back up step 10. And if you have a big book, page 84 talks about what step 10 is. But basically, you're going to be watching your thoughts, and it says if, not when. That says if selfishness, it says when, not if. When selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear crop up. So it says when, not if, meaning, it's not as if we get recovered and, we're perfect, we're human. But we have to do something with those thoughts and feelings differently than what we did before. So we're going to have to watch for that. And there are 5 actions that we take as part of step 10. First is you pause, you ask God to remove your selfishness. You kind of get centered there. And then, it says share it with someone at once. And so I usually do that with my sponsor. I usually send her a text. But if it's one that it's kind of sticky that I'm having a hard time with, then I just call her. And then if I've harmed anybody in the moment, I make an amend. And an amend is different than an apology. It's active. I'm owning up to what I've done wrong. I admit my defects of character, my own selfishness, dishonesty, inconsiderate. And I tell them I regret the harm and ask what I can do to make it right. My sponsor reminds me that, often I do need to check things out with her, including that amend part as part of step 10. Because, it's easy to get into people pleasing. So I do that. If it's kind of like, oh, I'm not sure if I should make an amend on this, I check that out with her. Sometimes it's very obvious. Like if I'm at work and I'm getting really irritated with the IT guy and I'm starting to get, snippy or snooty, short, then, I've overstepped the line there. But yeah. So that's another reason why a sponsor is vital. And so, and then I resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I can help. I try to help another compulsive eater when I can. If I can't, then I help somebody around. And then the last part of the last of the actions for step 10 is I'm going to resolutely turn my thoughts. The last part is love and tolerance is our code. So that's both a promise and a requirement. So that's something I have to work towards. So it's not as if I can say I'm irritated with this coworker and just, I've got the right to be irritated. I need to do the 10 step so that God can remove from me that what I'm feeling. And if I need to do several 10 steps on that, I do that. Because I've got to grow. I have to be willing to change and that's just the requirement of step 10, but it's a new way of dealing with life. I'm acting rather than reacting to life, which, it's an entirely different way to live. And I'm amazed. I've had some friction with coworkers recently and it's been transformed. And I give all the credit to God, and me working this program. And then step 12 is, has a couple parts to it, but it's, carrying the message of recovery, helping the still suffering compulsive eater. And there's many ways we can do that. One of those is, going in our local community, trying to find others that are suffering. Where did we go? It's called wind-up work. Where would other compulsive eaters wind up? And truthfully, we wound up everywhere. I mean, we went to the hairdresser, we stepped outside our door, and we're not walking on the block. So, there's nowhere really unique that we went to. But, whatever God puts on our heart and mind to go, that's what we do. And, we talk to people in the community or at places of employment so that they can learn a little bit more about what compulsive eating is, that there is a solution for people that just don't get better. They just continue to struggle. They seem to be getting worse. And I think about it now and I'm like, if my therapist hadn't recommended 12 steps for compulsive eating, I'm grateful that she knew about that. And I remember a prior therapist years before hesitating. She's like, well, I could send you to 12 steps for compulsive eating, but she said, then you're not going to be able to eat XYZ, because that was her understanding of it, which, that may occur in another program, not necessarily in this, the program I work. So again, that's the importance of, wind up work and, and honestly, I wouldn't have been ready to go when the other one mentioned it. So, but yeah, just it's interesting to think back to those things. So step 12, carry the message. That means in my local community, yes, I was scared to do it at first. Oh, who am I? I'm going to be going to these people and whatnot. But again, did I push through my discomfort so I could get my compulsive eating fix? Heck yeah. There's nothing for me to run up to the store at 11 o'clock at night, pitch black out. People probably thought I was nuts and I'm going to get my fix, or all the other crazy things I did. We got very uncomfortable and did some interesting things in order to get our fix. So, we're going to need to put that same effort and zeal, if you will, into our recovery. In fact, there's this great line in the book, or this passage I want to share related to that. So let's see. It's on page, from the big book. It's on page 63. So, Kat, this isn't the passage I gave you. This is just something else I'm mentioning. Oh, you're pulling it up. I'm so sorry. Forgive me, Kat.
No, it's
go
okay.
ahead with what you're doing.
You're right. You're good. Go ahead.
No, but you were pulling up page 63, which is actually, oddly enough, it's the next page after the other thing I'm going to share. So whatever you want to do. But yeah, this is page 63. This isn't the last thing I'm going to share, but it says, the first full paragraph, it says, actually, forgive me. All right. I'm sorry. That's the passage I'm going to read later. This passage here on page 97, it says, helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act a good Samaritan every day, if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep. Great interference with your pleasures. Now, that really just sticks with me. Great interference with your pleasures. And that line just kind of comes into my head a lot. If maybe I'm like, gee, I'd really like to sit down and watch that TV program, which, obviously God probably has, not saying I don't ever watch TV, but God probably has other plans for me. That line sticks in me. There's going to be great interferences with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money, your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Your telephone may jangle at any time of day or night. So I remember that when, I think about, maybe I am having a hesitation about doing something service related or whatnot. I'm reminded, well, how, what efforts did I go through for my illness? I have to put in that same zeal for my recovery. Yeah. So, and it says, occasionally you will have to meet such conditions. I just wanted to, that really ties in well to step 12. what I used to try to do is I used to try to leave wind-up work for last, and I would never get to it. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this service, and I'm calling these people, and but I just didn't have time to do that. And, again, this is the progressive illness. But even as I'm recovered, I'm not going to get that peace, that serenity, if I don't do what is required. So I remember my sponsors, just sharing with me, she's like, listen, more than, and yes, talking to newcomers and helping them is important, not saying that, but she's like, even more helpful than talking to newcomers sometimes is just doing that wind-up work. That's the shot in the arm that works for her. And boy, if that hasn't been the case for me, so I'm reminded of that. So if I'm, Dad's like, DeAna, you need to get in your car, you need to go XYZ place, a lot of times it doesn't even faze me. I'm happy to do it, but sometimes I'd rather not. I just do a 10-step because obviously I'm thinking I know best and I don't. So, yeah, it's really pretty amazing. You meet people. And another thing that my sponsor brought up, because I can get, sometimes I make things a little more complicated where I'm like, oh, do I have all the right business cards? And do I have a flashy flyer or a neat brochure? None of that matters. I mean, what did the founders do in AA? Did they have access to color printers? And no, they didn't. It was a person going in talking to another person. So if I don't have the stuff in my car, and I do try to keep the stuff in my car, by the way, just so I have it, I find that handy. It doesn't even matter. If I need to, I can text them my number, or I can write my number down. I can take a picture of my business card, send it to them. It doesn't matter as long as I'm, showing up, doing the work. It's not about being, oh, do I have all these accoutrements? So that's not an excuse, and that's what I used to get hung up on. Oh, I don't have an updated, nice, flashy brochure. It's about the interaction, and I make the effort. So when I do that, God puts into my path, more newcomers in unexpected ways. And yeah, it's just a really important part, is that carrying the message and doing the wind-up work. And that does include sponsoring, love sponsoring. I learned a lot. It's a real blessing and pleasure. And then, practicing the spiritual principles is part of step 12. Patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. I absolutely love there's a prayer at the end of the big book that I have used when I've had people that I just really had a grudge against. There was just such a hardness that I felt towards them. And I can't remember the page at the end of the book, and I apologize. But it basically says, if you pray for someone every day for 2 weeks, if you pray for that person, and you ask for them to have all the things you want for yourself, whether it's health, abundance. For me, it's like a life full of laughter and fun and travel and, wonderful things. If you will ask for that person to have those things every day for 2 weeks, but it says even if you don't feel that for them. So it doesn't matter if you feel it. You might be kind of gritting your teeth as you say it, but you say it every time. And I'm not going to say at 2 weeks it absolutely lifts, but not long after that, there's something that shifts. It changes. So I still have to be working my program. I still do 10, 11, and 12, but I'm telling you what, that's really been very, very helpful, that I pray for that person. And then eventually I do feel it at a heart level. I do feel that I want those things, and that's God working, and that's not me. So, what life looks like now and how that's different. Before recovery, my evenings when I got home, I'd plop usually in front of the TV a lot. I'd eat food, or, I'm just, watching lots of TV. Now my evenings are about what can I do and how can I contribute? What can I do to be helpful? So I actually look forward to, service commitments and things I need to do. I used to feel very useless. I remember they call it the dark night of the soul, but I just remember lying on the floor thinking, God, why am I even here? And I said, use me. And I just was feeling, like I said, very lost and whatnot. And being a recovered compulsive eater, I can see very clearly that God's got some, He has purpose for me here, and I'm to be helpful. I'm to use this experience that I've had to help others. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for this fellowship, for the contact with people. We share a common problem and a common solution, but I like to also talk with people, get to know them. But yeah, so that's pretty much my story. So I'm going to move on here. So let's see. I've chosen a passage. That resonates with my recovery, and that can be found on page. It's on page 62, and it's the paragraph on 62. So our troubles. There we go. It's so our troubles. Really, there's it's actually towards the last third of that paragraph that I really like to hone in on. I can't talk today. Hone in on. It says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. So this next part really sticks with me and has really been helpful to me. It comes to me a lot. Many of us have had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. Yeah, and so that just really sticks with me. Just want to say quickly on that, because I spent so much of my life wishing and wanting. And what it's telling us is that that's just not going to work. And sometimes my mind likes to play with that idea, like a wishing and wanting. It's like, that's just not going to work. And, I spent a lot of my life trying to better myself, self-help therapy and all that kind of stuff, trying to mold myself into something when really I'm going to be what God wants me to be. I just worked this program. God's going to take care of that, So that's why I like that one. I'm going to leave my contact information. So again, my name's DeAna, and I am a recovered available sponsor. And my phone number is 440-522-0759. And that's Eastern Standard Time. And that's good for calls. You can text. And I have WhatsApp. And I'd be very happy to help. Okay. So we're going to move into the question and answer and commenting section of the meeting. At this time, anyone is welcome to ask questions or provide comments from what is shared today. If you have worked the steps, you can also share your recovery experience around what was shared today. Please keep your shares brief to allow for others to have an opportunity to share and ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand or unmute if you have questions or comments or would like to share your experience.
Thanks, Kat. I could kick us off. I just have a comment. Just wanting to share that. I guess the comment, like every time, like, hey, I heard Kat say on a meeting, I was like, oh God, what did I say? So I was like, hopefully it makes sense. But just about that, growing into discomfort. I kind of had a shock not too recently because I had someone I was sponsoring was asking for like more ways to grow, or like how can I keep up with like all these like different services or things to do, or how often to like sign up for meetings or moderate, etc. And so I came up with this document just to kind of help them. But like as I was making it, like because I sent it to some people I sponsor, and they're like, "Do you do all these things?" And I was like, well, not usually at the same time, but it's kind of just, sometimes we don't appreciate just how much that we do that's uncomfortable, and we kind of even forget how uncomfortable we've gotten. So, yeah, I just think it was a great reminder that, there's always more ways to grow. And even sometimes when we feel like we've been in program and man, like I'm just not really killing it or doing it the way I'm supposed to, or I'm not doing enough. Like sometimes we have to really take a pause and recognize like how far we've come, and it's not because of us, but that amazing power that we're connected to. Because sometimes I just look back and think about things I did, and I'm like, oh my God, how did I have like the comfort to get through that? And I didn't. And it's actually that amazing discomfort that's propelled me into so many things. And every time I say I can't do it, God proves that I'm wrong and saying, here you go again. So yeah, just a great reminder just to take that reflection and appreciation that as much as we don't think we're ready, in hindsight, there's so much more that came out of it, and so much more that we have than what we realize. So yeah, so thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, DeAna, this is Lelia. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Yes, and I was wondering whether you could share again the passage that where you spoke about on the big book, in the big book, where you are praying for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And how you
Yeah,
use it, and how you use it, because
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Trying to think what page that's in.
552.
Well, you said 552. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, page 552. Yes, thank you. It's at the paragraph he said. So page 552, paragraph he said, and I'll read it for you if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it says, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them, and your prayers are only words, and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks, and you will find that you have come to mean it and will want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassionate understanding and love. So yeah, you just do that every day for 2 weeks. And again, even if you don't feel for the person, you just do it. And I edited the words a little bit, like, again, anything that I wanted for myself, I said, but it's really helped.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you for asking.
And then if I may ask you a follow-up question, well, not a follow-up question to this issue, unless somebody else wants to raise a question.
I think you're good.
Okay, thank you. So growing into discomfort is something I'm always thinking about as I walk myself through a program. Being of service, step 12, has been slowly growing in me. I guess one of my big, it's a fear that I have. It's getting into sponsoring someone. So I was wondering how you encounter the people you sponsor at the very beginning. What is your approach?
Mm-hmm. And if I heard you correctly, you said you have nervousness about sponsoring someone?
I haven't sponsored anyone yet.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's one of those things where, until you're doing it, you're going to have maybe some of that nervousness. But truly, just like everything else you've done so far in working the program, you probably were like, I wonder what that's going to be like. And then you do it. I had to be nudged. Like, I like to use the analogy of the bird that kind of just pushes the chick off.
Yes.
I did. I drug my feet a bit, and my sponsor reminded me, this is back when she's like, well, I don't know many people that, stay recovered if they don't, do what you're going to have to give away what you've been so freely given. And what helped me is just to realize, because what I used to do is it used to be about my ego, like, oh, what do I have to offer? And I don't have 5 years of recovery in this. And what I was reminded is look, I've got at least one day more than someone else does. And everybody had to start somewhere. Where did Dr. Bob and Bill start? They had to start at day one, and they were really fumbling through. They didn't even have a 12-step program written out. So it really isn't about all that stuff that my ego is putting up. It's just me helping another person, and it's a requirement. I've got to give away what I've been so freely given. So that just kind of helped me. It helped take the pressure off, that I don't have to be some kind of superstar in the program to be a good sponsor. And it's going to be a learning process. I've heard people that have recovered now 10 years or more saying, I'm glad I'm not the sponsor I used to be. So even in that, people change, and that's okay. But the point is that we start somewhere,
Yeah.
and God, and I really feel like God's in charge of all that. So
Yes. Thank you.
yeah, welcome.
It's Kat. I just have a quick question. Just based on your story, you kind of had, like you discussed about how you kind of had this like back and forth, kind of in and out with program. Do you feel like that's helped you as you're helping new people, or is there like any part of you that ever has like, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have like missed that time? I know you kind of mentioned you felt like you needed that time, but how do you kind of come to terms with your recovery being maybe different than what you imagined it being?
Yeah, thank you. Like the second time I left, would I have rather not had the experience I had? Yes, I would have. However, I don't get hung up on that anymore. I just accept it. I really feel like it was God's plan for me. I had some experiences that I came out of to learn about, and I think it helps me. I think it's part of my journey. And honestly, I wouldn't want to hear that everybody's, hey, I came in a program and it's just been, whatever. And while that's ideal that people don't leave or have a relapse, they talk about it in the big book. Sometimes it happens, so we all are unique. And I feel like it's added to my experience. So when I'm talking to a newcomer, maybe there is somebody that's a relief to them to hear, oh, well, you didn't just come in and then, you just, there's all these, I definitely feel like it's added to my growth and learning. And, like I said, both times my sponsors were like, you need to leave. And if you're chronic, you'll be back. And then the joke my sponsor and I had was, well, your higher power just wants you to know you're really chronic. And so I don't get into my ego about it anymore. I look at it like this too, is that I've learned about what works and what doesn't as well. So God wanted me to have some experiences, and I've learned, and I feel like it helps me. Okay. Now let's have a moment of silence for the compulsive eater who still suffers, followed by the, so this is the prayer I got to choose, right, Kat?
Correct.
Okay. Followed by the prayer of St. Francis, or your own prayer said in silence. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Lord, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And I like that prayer because it reminds me that it's about what I'm going to contribute today and not about what I can get. So I need to be reminded of that.